Time for green. All right. Uh, Man, it's been a while since I've gone back to this. It's been a few weeks. But I really do want to get to the end of it because like this has really been invigorating for like trimming the chaff, like finding things that don't work just by having to look at every single one and describe them to people. All right. Groundskeeper. Um, there are some things that play with lands and graveyards, but otherwise this is mostly part of the various kinds of uh, like squee, goblin nabob type effects, but on a little green guy. Portcullis fine. There's a creatures with defender sub theme. It helps green decks sort of like turbo through their deck if they are not. Excuse me. If they are not using like Axebane Guardian and need to keep the defenders in play. Useful with. There's a wall coming up later, I think, that you can get, quote unquote, infinite card draw with over a long series of turns. Wirewood Symbiote. This used to work with. Oh boy, I really should have looked up. I'll probably go in and add just up on the screen the name of the changeling that I had to remove that combos really fun with this. By making this itself into an elf, which means you can return it. You can still do this with the blue enchantment where you choose elf and this plus a creature that taps for more than one mana, which as we'll see there are multiple of those in green. It allows you to make infinite green mana or infinite some kind of mana. Slightly fewer ways to combo with it. Might only be the one way, but I think that's fine. Bamboo Grove Archer, one of the 5 or 6 enchantment creatures, which means that you can tutor for it if you want to tutor for a creature. While under Enduring Ideal, it's a 3/3 defender, so it works with the defender sub theme, has reach, which is nice. Destroying a creature with flying. This is also, I really like, there are a few cards with some kind of channel or channel-like ability, which can be useful when you are under some kind of lock where you can't cast spells, that you might have a way out, or the ability to still do something game relevant when unable to cast spells. And I think that's really good. When I'm looking to add things later, like this is something that I will probably take a closer look at in terms of what are the most likely kinds of you can't cast spell locks that you are under. Are there cards with channel abilities that directly impact that? So the blue one definitely does because you can bounce any non-land permanent. This one is like less likely to, unless the person who has you under a lock, their main way of winning is a flyer, and if they only have one flyer, then this will like stop that. Bloom Tender. Bloom Tender is one of the many green, especially creatures that tap for more than one mana, which is useful not just for infinite combos with untapping and like making Wirewood Symbiote an elf, also useful with blue's untap theme to make a ton of extra mana for every untap. Dawnstrider is like the simplest way to lock out the combat step. Obviously your opponent has to not be able to interact with a 1/1, but like that's possible that your opponent doesn't have like a ton of ways. It costs 3 or less, so it is like one of the easiest things to interact with. But there are a lot of things, like we just saw Groundskeeper at the start of this, as a way of like continually having enough cards in hand to lock out the combat step and fog every turn. I did want to make it like kind of easy, but I also, except for I think Constant Miss, which will show up later in this color, that like every other way of locking out the combat step is on the board, so that you're not doing something like paying all your life for hatred and then getting locked out. It's like if your opponent has an untapped Dawnstrider in play and cards in hand, you're not going to cast hatred. You have to figure out a way to get around that. So I like that. Elvish Visionary. Again, just like it's another elf for things like, as we see in 2 cards, Priest of Titania. It helps you search through, or velocity through your deck. I think most versions of this cube would have cards like this. Fauna Shaman. I can't remember. Is Rexer in here? Okay. I was pretty sure it wasn't, that I didn't put Survival of the Fittest in here, as it felt like a little too strong with Recurring Nightmare at the sort of power level of this cube, even if the cards you're getting are like a little bit janky. But Fauna Shaman is fine. And it has the benefit that there are like a bunch of other creature tutors, so you can like tutor for this to tutor for other creatures, etc. I think that's fine. Priest of Titania, there are probably people who, you know, when they're looking at all the weird old cards in this cube, that won't notice that it looks for all elves in play, which might be relevant sometimes. But yeah, just like having another mana creature, you know, one of Green's ways of getting ahead in this cube is having like an enormous mana advantage. Scaled Nurturer, another mana creature. Also lets you gain a little bit of life when you cast dragons, and there's definitely the dragon sub-theme. It is also a dragon itself. So if you do have an absolutely huge dragon storm, you know, this could be your 4th dragon that you get, maybe. Tempting Worm is like kind of a joke. The fact that it like lets your opponent Eureka. It is partly a joke in that like people are much more likely to have like a bunch of crazy things in hand, and so like letting your opponent Eureka is especially scary in this cube. I have absolutely seen someone be killed by Tempting Worm when their opponent had it's not Stern Proctor, maybe it's the card that turns off all enters the battlefield abilities. So this was just a 5/5 for 2, and that was like, and they played it on I think turn 3. And just beat their opponent down. But also you can just play it late, and like a 5/5 is really big. There are not even a ton of the defenders that can block a 5/5 effectively. And as far as like quote unquote chip damage goes, like 5 is a lot of chip damage. Like it is one of the faster non-infinite clocks. You just have to get around that horrible downside, or just cross your fingers and like your opponent had Fauna Shaman or something in their hand instead of any of their combo pieces, and you just like let them get a turn closer to their combo, but that's it. Or like 2 turns or something, and maybe having a 5/5 in play, and maybe you also have one of those fling effects or whatever, and your opponent is actually much closer to dead than they realize, even if they put their whole hand onto the battlefield. Thallid Shell Dweller. I wanted a defender that had like some kind of slow advantage, that in the worlds there are a few ways in the cube to take infinite turns. That I wanted a defender that if you took infinite turns by itself with no other threats in the deck, you could win the game. And Thallid Shell Dweller ended up being it. Wall of Blossoms. I have a defender theme. I have, you know, I want green to have deck velocity. Wall of Blossoms. I have Wall of Omens in here too. There's, again, sort of no universe where Wall of Blossoms wouldn't be in this cube. Wall of Mulch. This is just another card like Portcullis Vine. It's like a second copy of Portcullis Vine, where green can get deck velocity by using these various walls to slow down the opponent, get a mana advantage in many cases, and then sacrifice them to get card advantage. This feels like a common way for green to be playing in this cube. Whatever your top end is. Wall of Roots and Hexbane Guardian. Speaking of walls that give you mana advantage, Wall of Roots classic, obvious. Has the benefit that, you know, you can do one of the many ways to sack it after it gets too small to be blocking or doing anything again. And then Axebane Guardian is like one of the big sort of like, top end is the wrong word. But it is one of the payoffs for, wow, look at all of these defenders that I have in my pool. I also wanted more defenders in green's pool because if green is getting a big mana advantage, I don't want it to be easy to convert that into, oh, I have like a bunch of 4/4s and 5/5s and I just kill you normally like it is a normal limited game. So green has higher creature density than a lot of the colors, but a lot of those creatures have defender. So you can't just like convert a mana and card advantage engine into a bunch of big beefy creatures and win the game a normal way. You like use those to turbo through your deck and find your various pieces of like more interesting things that you're doing. Carven Caryatid, really nothing much to say here that I didn't say already, since there's this huge chunk of defenders all in a row here. Ramunap Excavator, like I said, there are things that care about getting lands into your graveyard, but also this is one of the ways that you use things like Constant Miss or Glacial Chasm to lock out the combat step, and then you're using these Crucible of Worlds effects to like not fully lock yourself out in terms of how many lands you have in play. Spike Feeder, obvious infinite combo type card. Unlike, I believe, Cleric Class is the only 2-card combo in the cube, and it's like Cleric Class level 2. So it takes a little bit of work. And it also has the downside of like sometimes, you know, this is kind of a combo oriented cube. Infinite life is not necessarily the end of the game. I wanted to allow, there are a few things trigger on life gain, and so like gaining infinite life in 2 life increments plus any of those third cards might be good enough. But yeah, I wanted to, again, in terms of strength, like a lot of the Spike Feeder infinite combos are with other cards that are too good, like Archangel of Thune. Archangel of Thune is way too good for this cube. That's like unbelievably scary efficient. And so like level 2 of Cleric Class is about the speed of this cube for a 2-card infinite life combo. Draconic Muralists. I just wanted a card. Again, this is in the realm of you might chip in for a little bit, and then eventually you trade this off, and then you get one of your good dragons, and you can cast that. Or this is your 3rd or 4th dragon you get off of Dragonstorm. That like one of the nice things about the sets that produce these like smaller dragons was that you could conceivably create like a green-red deck or something where all of your major sort of interstitial pieces before you get up to Dragonstorm summoning are also dragons themselves. So like a really high Dragonstorm count could get like all of the relevant creatures from your deck. Obviously, in terms of like if you get this with Dragonstorm, you probably don't have any good dragons left in your deck if it dies. But it's just that it's like okay in both directions. I need to look to see. I don't know if anyone has drafted Dragonstorm yet in the cube. Like my sort of top 2 decks that I'm like nervous about, or that feel less obvious maybe, is just like tons of mana green, variations on tons of mana green, and like Dragonstorm is one of the top ends of that possible deck that I haven't really seen. The other one is like the Spellslinger, cast big instants and sorceries over and over again to win, that I haven't really seen. That one at least feels like not very obvious, whereas this is like, all the creatures I've gotten to this point are like kind of pointing in that direction to some extent of like green, make big mana, and then go over the top in some way. Keeper of Progenitus. I have, I think, almost every Mana Flare effect in the cube that has ever been printed, and I really like where they're at. I have successfully played a game where I had like 3-ish Mana Flare effects in play for like several turns and the game didn't end, and like that's where I want it to be, where you can like give someone a huge mana advantage, but it is not just like, oh, I play this and then I hold my breath and I have 8 mana next turn and I like win the game instantly. Like I prefer that you might have to do more. Acidic Slime. Acidic Slime is like so versatile in this cube. I think Acidic Slime is first pickable, honestly. Even if it didn't have Death Touch, like having a green creature that can destroy an artifact or enchantment with no restrictions on targeting is rare enough in this cube that I would probably first pick an Acidic Slime. Just really versatile. Genesis, obviously good for, putting into your graveyard with Fauna Shaman, can give you some sort of late game inevitability. Also good with squee as a squee type effect if you need to be squeeing something for 3 mana a turn. But failing that, you can just keep getting back combo pieces over and over again, and like if you have a fully creature based combo, like eventually rebuilding your combo using a Genesis over several turns. Emerald Dragon, obviously 4/4 flying trample is like just fine as far as Dragonstorm targets go. I have like better dragons, but like this is totally serviceable as like your second dragon or something. And then also like countering an activated or triggered ability from a non-creature source. There are a lot of them in this cube, and so like having some kind of counter that way is like I really like it. Also useful or of note is that Draconic Muralist dying can get an Emerald Dragon so that you have Dissonant Wave up. And that's cool. Apex Devastator. This is one of the ways that you use your like large amount of mana to do something. What fun text. Really, really fun. Like four Cascade. Not like an incredible card, but really fun. Also, obviously, like having a green creature with big stats is useful for the fling attacks that are in the cube. Speaking of green creature with big stats, the next two are that. So Ghoul Tree, obviously, just this is one of green sub themes. It's just absolutely gigantic creatures, and this costing less based on creatures in your graveyard when there are all these various things like Fauna Shaman, Recurring Nightmare, etc., etc. Like Ghoul Tree just being like a 10/10 that you might play for very cheaply is I think just fine with what green is trying to do. Nyxborn Behemoth, a very scary 10/10. Also an enchantment creature. I have tutored this with Enduring Ideal to just have a 10/10 trampler into play. Also, there are a lot of non-creature enchantments in this cube. So, like, Nyxborn Behemoth will probably not cost 12 if you have to cast it for real. And you will probably have several opportunities to keep it indestructible. Polyraptor right now, there are some infinite combos, but I think they're all like 3-card combos. Like right now, Aether Flash and Polyraptor draw the game. I don't know if this is pulling its weight, especially for like an 8 mana 5/5. Like it is a cool ability, but I think it's possible that Polyraptor is on its way out. Certainly if Aether Flash leaves, Polyraptor's stock drops precipitously if you can't even set up like, some sort of bombardment effect, Polyraptor Aether Flash, and like win the game that way. Jiang Yangu is, I believe at this point, the only Planeswalker in the cube. I had other Planeswalkers, and like for a while, and they were all green, and like my idea was like, oh, green is the only one with Planeswalkers. That like their way of attacking the theme of this cube sideways is they can like build up advantage with some of these like quote unquote worse green Planeswalkers. And all the other green Planeswalkers that I put in were just like did not feel right for the cube. Like they were taking over the game and creating like normal Planeswalker type problems. But especially the other ones had ultimates. And it's sometimes like really hard to attack in this cube. Like it's really hard to get damage in. And so you had Planeswalkers with ultimates that would take, 6 turns to get to them. And that was just like a totally reasonable thing to do, and a lot of the ultimates that the old cards had were just not interesting enough for that play pattern. So this just like leaning into the mana creature thing with green. It works as one of the ways to put +1/+1 counters on things, which matters for, is it all will be one? I think all will be one is like, maybe on the chopping block, but I think I'll keep Jungyangu just because I think it works really. It's like a very simple ability, and because it doesn't have an ultimate, that it's one of these War of the Spark. Might not literally be War of the Spark. I always think of the like planeswalkers that are cheap and don't have an ultimate as War of the Spark planeswalkers, even if they're not. Natural State. This is really trying to point in the direction of like, oh, you want a disenchant? Well, this disenchant can't hit anything expensive. But it's really cheap and it's an instant. So like a 1 mana instant speed interaction, the fact that you can't break up a combo that has a bunch of expensive cards like might suck, but like again, this might be first pickable. Honestly, I'm not sure, but like a 1 mana instant speed interaction when your opponent might have some kind of combo deck is like really powerful. Constant Mists, probably the best Infinite Fog effect. The fact that it's like not on a permanent makes it really hard to interact with, which I think is just fine. Obviously, you need some kind of crucible effect so that you don't eventually lose all your lands. But yeah, I think there's like 4 or 5 ways to blank all combat that I can think of off the top of my head. And this just, I think, is the most powerful one because it's so hard to interact with. So it's harder. I wanted some of them to be, I wanted blanking the combat step to be one of the easiest things to do, to ask your opponent, okay, you can't do this anymore, now what? Once Upon a Time feels combo-y, but also is just like a really good dig spell. And like I liked having a free spell in this cube that is like mostly not free. I used to have a bunch of free weird funky counter spells and they were all like way too good. But I'm glad Once Upon a Time is still in there. And especially as a card that kind of scales with the thing that you're finding, where it's like really, really good in some versions of like vintage power level cubes, eternal cubes. And it's like pretty good here. Yeah. Chord of Calling, knew I was going to have Chord of Calling. This works very well with greens, like mana advantage, a lot of creatures, a lot of defenders, and then convert those into getting some important combo creature. Biorhythm. There are going to be, I think, plenty of decks that do not have a ton of creatures in them, that they have like 1 or 2 in play, and you might have like 5, and then you can just like kill those creatures and cast Biorhythm and win instantly, or maybe they gain infinite life and then you cast Biorhythm and you put them to 3 and then you kill them that way. I like Biorhythm being in this cube. Incoming. Okay, so incoming might not work within the rules of Magic. The fact that like you get to Eureka, both players get to Eureka your whole deck, and it costs quadruple green. Though a lot of the ways to get mana advantage in green do give you more green mana, but like, boy, I wrote my list of combos on the description of this cube. Incoming says that it combos with no fear, where you're just playing 40 card stud and you say to your opponent, like, I bet if we put all of our artifacts, creatures, enchantments, and lands onto the battlefield together right now, that my deck would win when that happens. And I like that aspect. This is also kind of similar, like a second copy of Primal Surge, which is the like keep flipping cards into play off the top of your deck as long as they're permanents. Obviously, it's like a little bit awkward if you were like, I'm going to run both of these so that I have 2 versions of Primal Surge, given that Primal Surge itself would get stopped by incoming, and that would be like kind of lame. Especially because it like exiles that card. So if you hit incoming 3 cards in, you'd not only have a bad Primal Surge, but your incoming would be exiled. But I absolutely played like a Primal Surge deck where I knew I had like all permanents except for Primal Surge, and I had like several instant speed combos, where I knew if I put my whole deck into play, I could like win before I had to pass the turn. And yeah, I really like the deck building restriction that this puts on you. Bow of Nylea, very like it can do a lot of little things. I think the most obvious thing it does is it allows you to not be decked. This was obviously on my mind partly from playing the Ornithopter cube, 100 Ornithopter cube, like a bunch, quote unquote a bunch. I had probably played it, I played it twice at the point that I went together, maybe once. But at the time, like the Bow of Nylea no Ornithopters deck was possible, and Andy has worked to make that less true, but it was on my mind. And it's not like great at any given thing other than stopping you from decking. But it's just very versatile. And some of those other things might be relevant. It's also a way to keep dealing 1 damage with all will be 1 every turn. Again, I don't know if that is worth it. Bootlegger's Stash is the most obvious way to go infinite with Time Sieve. Most of the other ways to go infinite with Time Sieve that have been printed are like way too good for this cube. I think the go-to example is Thopter Assembly. There's like the 5/5 flyer that if you don't have any Thopter tokens in play, it bounces itself and makes 5 Thopter tokens. That card is like way too powerful for this, like a 5/5 flyer for 6 that then makes 5 1/1s. So this is the easiest way to go infinite. This also is like, I think, fine as a card to, again, piece together the sort of like green mana advantage deck. In general, the like helping a green deck also be many colors. This is also, I think, one of the most expensive tinker targets. Let's double check that. Type artifact. Most expensive one here is 3, 1, 4, 6, 7, and 5. 6 and 5. Yeah, this is like one of the most expensive tinker targets in the entire cube. And it's nice if you like tinker for this with 3 lands. Then next turn you can maybe make 4 treasures, and then the turn after that you have 8 or 9 mana. Yeah, I think that's about where I want the power level to keep to be. Keen Sense. I wanted more than one curiosity effect to combo with, especially Niv Mizzet original recipe. This one's, I think, especially funny because you then need green on top of blue, blue, red, red. But there are other cards that deal direct damage to an opponent. So I wanted like Keen Sense to also line up with those. And for if you have a deck where Curiosity is one of the combo cards, I wanted it to not just be only 2 cards in the whole cube, especially when one of the pieces is like a little bit on the weak side. Heartbeat of Spring, mostly nothing to say there, just one of the many mana flares. Presence of Gond. Presence of Gond goes infinite with Intruder Alarm. This also means that with the enchantment creatures, you can search for an enchantment creature and Presence of Gond and Intruder Alarm when you are under Enduring Ideal. Like you can search for a whole infinite creature combo while you are also under Epic. I really liked that. Allurin. There are several ways to go off with Allurin. I probably haven't even thought through all of them. But yeah, it's also like, I like the scariness in the same way that there are a few Eureka type effects, like that you're just saying to your opponent, like, I think it's fine if I let you cast all of your cheap creatures for free at instant speed because I have a combo that involves it. I don't know if anyone has gone up with Learn yet in this cube. I don't think so. Could be wrong. Lost in the Woods is why I have twice as many forests as any other basic land in the basic land box, because I want someone who is playing a Jeskai deck to be able to quietly sideboard into a 43 forest Lost in the Woods deck when they see that their opponent doesn't have a way to win outside of the combat step. Is it good? Probably not. But it's so iconic. It's so beautiful. The fact that you could sometimes get away with doing this in the actual limited format it was printed in is just like so beautiful to me. The fact that like if your opponent just has a bunch of ways to make infinite attackers, that if you have Lost in the Woods and nothing else, that you can stop infinite, kiki jiki created copies of things or whatever, is just like also really nice. Recycle, like I said when I saw the black version a few videos ago, I think this is better than most people give it credit for. I think this is good enough to play, and I think most people leave this in their sideboard, and I think they're probably wrong to do so. Could be wrong there. Could be the case that like you play this and you don't have anything in hand, and then you never draw a card ever again, and you lose the game. But I don't think that's true. And there are also like so many ways to recur things that you can be in situations where Recycle is technically the last spell that you play, but then you like recur something with Genesis or whatever, and you can like keep the loop going. Sandworm Convergence, I wanted something like a good thing to get with Enduring Ideal that would like lock out the combat step a little bit. This also obviously works for like the quote-unquote hard lockout if either you have it come down and then after a few turns you have enough worms that probably people can't attack on the ground anyway, but also with Form of the Dragon, like Sandworm Convergence, Forward of the Dragon, now you can't be attacked on the ground or not ground. It's also just fine to cast. Like 8 mana in green in this cube is not a huge amount. I think there are a lot of ways to play your like turn 3 Tinker for Bootlegger Stash and then play this 2 turns later, or play your turn 3 Heartbeat and then play a land and then tap 8 mana to play this. So like I definitely wanted some 8 mana plays in green specifically. And this is a really good one that also like serves several other purposes. Okay, sample pack. Random sample pack. Ooh, interesting. Okay. So probably what you should like, the boring pick is, I don't know, one of the lands maybe. Absorb V or Reforge the Soul are pretty reasonable. Sentinel Dispatch is probably the like obvious boring pick because it'll make your deck 100% of the time. But one of the benefits of first picks is you're like staking your claim. I see Ureni in here. I don't think anyone's going to take a 3-color dragon like this early. And the thing that I'm seeing in here is if I first pick Dragonstorm, I am almost certainly tabling Ureni. And if I'm not tabling Ureni, I might table like Overabundance or Bountiful Landscape. And these things will help me get to Dragonstorm. So I think my heart is taking Dragonstorm here, even if it's wrong. All right, that is green. So I just have artifacts and multicolor and lands, which I don't know yet if that'll be 3 videos or 2, but we're almost done.